Isabella Martinez, that's my name. I never knew my dad, but honestly, I didn't feel like I was missing out on much. Mom worked her ass off to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. From as early as I can remember, I was helping around the house. Dishes, laundry, you name it. Mom always said, "Bella, you gotta learn to take care of yourself. The world ain't gonna do it for you." Those words stuck with me. Our apartment was small, but it was home. The sound of Mom's ancient sewing machine was the soundtrack to my childhood. She'd stay up late, mending clothes for extra cash. I'd often fall asleep to its rhythmic hum. What did I like? Computers. It started when our school got a bunch of donated PCs. Most kids used them for games, but I was fascinated by what made them tick. I'd stay after school, tinkering, learning. One day, Mr. Johnson, the IT teacher, caught me trying to install some video editing software. "What are you up to, Isabella?" he asked, eyebrow raised. I froze, thinking I was in trouble. I just wanted to learn how to edit videos. Instead of getting mad, he smiled. "Well, why didn't you say so? Let me show you a few tricks." From then on, every Tuesday and Thursday after school, Mr. Johnson would teach me the ins and outs of video editing. At home, I'd practice on our old, wheezing computer. As high school graduation approached, reality hit hard. College wasn't in the cards for me. The day after graduation, I marched into WKLP, our local TV station. The receptionist looked at me like I was crazy when I asked about job openings, but pointed me towards the HR office. 3 interviews and 1 practical test later, I had my first real job. Assistant video editor. The pay wasn't great, but it was a start. For the next 2 years, I worked my ass off. Weekdays at the station, weekends doing freelance gigs. Every penny I could spare went into my college fund. It was exhausting, but I was determined. Then, on a rare night out with Lisa and Carlos, everything changed. We were at this house party, some friend of a friend thing. That's where I met him, Ryan Thompson. He wasn't what you'd call classically handsome. Kinda nerdy, with thick-rimmed glasses and a slightly crooked smile. But when he started talking about his work in software development, his whole face lit up. I was intrigued. As the party wound down, Ryan asked for my number. I hesitated for a second, then thought, what the hell, and gave it to him. The next few months were like a whirlwind. Ryan and I started dating, and it was nice. Different from what I expected, but in a good way. One night, as we were walking home from a movie, Ryan proposed to me, and I agreed. The wedding was small but beautiful. My mom cried happy tears, and Ryan's parents, Linda and Robert, well, they surprised me. I'd been nervous about meeting them, given the whole wealthy family thing. But they were warm and welcoming from the start. The first 2 years of our marriage were good. Not perfect, but good. We had our own place, a cozy apartment not far from the TV station where I still worked. Ryan had his job at some big tech firm, and things were comfortable. We traveled a bit, mostly weekend trips around the country. It was more than I'd ever done growing up, and I loved every minute of it. Seeing new places, trying new foods, it was like a whole new world had opened up to me. But then, things started to change. It started with the little things. Ryan would sigh when I talked about work, or roll his eyes when I got excited about a new editing technique I'd learned. Then more. The first time he made an excuse not to take me to a work party, I didn't think much of it. "It's just a boring office thing," he said. "You wouldn't enjoy it." But then it happened again and again. One night, I overheard him on the phone with a coworker. "Yeah, just me tonight. You know how it is. Bella's not really into these kinds of events." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Not into these events? He'd never even given me a chance. That night, I confronted him. "Ryan, why don't you want me to come to your work events anymore? So you're ashamed of me?" "No, it's not that. It's just, sometimes it's hard for you to keep up with the conversations, you know? I don't want you to feel out of place. His words stung, but a part of me wondered if he was right. Maybe I did need to step up my game. So, I made a decision. I was going to go back to school. I enrolled in night classes at the local community college, studying information technology. It was tough, balancing work and school and my marriage, but I was determined to make it work. But even as I worked my ass off to improve myself, things with Ryan kept getting worse. The cold shoulder turned into open contempt. The man I married seemed to be disappearing before my eyes, replaced by someone I barely recognized. And then came the night that changed everything. I'd just gotten home from a late class, exhausted but feeling good about acing a test. Ryan was in the living room, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "Where have you been?" he demanded. "Class, remember? I told you I had a big test tonight." He scoffed. "You're a fool and a hillbilly, Bella. And no amount of schooling is going to change that." I felt like I'd been slapped. But before I could respond, I heard a gasp from the doorway. Linda and Robert was standing there, a look of horror on their faces. Linda leaned forward, her eyes flashing. "How dare you talk to your wife like that? Ryan, we raised you better than this." "You don't understand," Ryan said, his voice rising. "Do you know how embarrassing it is to have a wife who can't even keep up with basic conversations at work events?" I flinched, but Robert's next words shocked us all into silence. "Embarrassing?" he thundered. "Let me tell you about embarrassing, boy. Your grandfather, my father, didn't have a lick of formal education. He was born in the poorest part of town, worked his fingers to the bone to give me a better life. So don't you dare sit there and act like you're some kind of aristocrat." I felt a rush of warmth towards my in-laws, but Ryan's next words froze it in its tracks. "I'll behave how I see fit," he spat. "This is my life, my marriage." After his parents left, Ryan started going away more often. "Weekend trips with friends," he'd say, not even bothering to invite me anymore. I threw myself into work and school, taking on extra weekend gigs to fill the lonely hours. Then, my mom got sick. Cancer, the doctors said. It was aggressive, and within months, she was gone. I felt lost, adrift without my anchor. Ryan was barely there, offering awkward pats on the back instead of the comfort I craved. In my grief, I found myself turning to Linda more and more. She'd call to check on me, invite me over for tea, just sit and talk with me for hours. It was the motherly comfort I desperately needed. But this only seemed to infuriate Ryan more. One night, after I'd spent the afternoon at his parents' house, he exploded. "Why are you always over there?" he yelled. "Are you trying to turn my parents against me?" I was stunned. "What? No, Ryan. I needed someone to talk to." I went to bed that night with tears in my eyes, wondering how things had gone so wrong. A few weeks later, I started feeling off. Exhausted all the time, nauseous in the mornings. At first, I chalked it up to stress and grief. But as the symptoms persisted, a different possibility started to form in my mind. I bought a pregnancy test on my way home from work one day, my heart pounding as I waited for the results. When those two lines appeared, I felt a mix of joy and terror. A baby. We were having a baby. That night, I waited nervously for Ryan to come home. When he finally walked through the door, I took a deep breath. "Ryan, we need to talk. I'm pregnant." The look on his face wasn't joy, or even surprise. It was pure fury. "Pregnant?" he spat. "Are you kidding me? We can't have a baby now. Get an abortion, Bella. That's final." I fled the apartment, tears streaming down my face. Without thinking, I found myself at Linda and Robert's doorstep. When Linda opened the door and saw my face, she immediately pulled me into a hug. Through my sobs, I told them everything. About the pregnancy, about Ryan's reaction. I've never seen Robert look so angry, or Linda so determined. You listen to me, Isabella, Linda said, holding my face in her hands. This is your decision. If you want this baby, we'll support you every step of the way. Ryan be damned. The next few months were a blur of doctor's appointments, work, and growing tension at home. Ryan barely spoke to me, spending most of his time out with friends. I focused on my job, squirreling away every extra penny I could for the baby. One afternoon, I had a doctor's appointment to get some routine tests done. I'd taken half a day off work and was looking forward to a quiet evening at home afterward. As I pulled into our apartment complex, I noticed Ryan's car in the parking lot. Strange, he was usually at work at this hour. I climbed the stairs to our apartment, fumbling with my keys. As I opened the door, I heard Ryan's voice. I'll be there in a minute, babe. Just grabbing my overnight bag. My heart started racing. I stepped inside, and there was Ryan, packing a suitcase. Who were you talking to? Where are you going? Before he could answer, I heard a car horn honk outside. Ryan cursed under his breath and grabbed his bag. I don't have time for this. We'll talk when I get back. I followed him down to the parking lot, demanding answers. And that's when I saw her. Sitting in the passenger seat of Ryan's car was a woman. She was beautiful, with long blonde hair and perfect makeup. And she was very, very pregnant. As I stood there, frozen in shock, she got out of the car. She walked towards me with a smug smile on her face. So, you must be Isabella, she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. I'm Melissa, Ryan's girlfriend. I turned to Ryan, who couldn't even meet my eyes. Is this true? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, still not looking at me. I felt a surge of anger and disgust. Aren't you ashamed? I asked Melissa, my voice shaking. He's married. We're having a baby too. Melissa's smile turned cold. Ashamed? No, honey, I had to fight for my happiness, and you've already lost this battle. It's not my fault you couldn't keep your man satisfied. I turned to Ryan, fury replacing my shock. How could you do this? To me, to our baby? He finally looked at me, his face a mask of indifference. Come on, Bella, we both know this marriage was a mistake. I never loved you. You were convenient. A good housekeeper, someone to keep the bed warm. But Melissa, she's my soulmate. She's smart, educated. She fits into my world. Each word was like a knife in my heart. I stood there, tears streaming down my face, as Ryan got into the car with Melissa. I'll be back on Monday to get the rest of my things, he said. We can talk about the divorce then. As they drove away, I sank to my knees in the parking lot, my world crumbling around me. I picked up my phone with shaking hands and dialed Linda's number. When they arrived at my apartment that night, Linda took one look at my tear-stained face and pulled me into a fierce hug. I listened, numb, as Robert berated Ryan over the speakerphone. His words were sharp, cutting. How dare you treat your wife this way, he thundered. The woman carrying your child. Ryan's voice came through, defensive and cold. Dad, you don't understand. Melissa is. Don't you dare mention that woman's name. Linda cut in. We will never accept her, do you hear me? Never. There was a pause, then Ryan's voice, eerily calm. Fine, I don't need your acceptance. I don't need you at all, I have Melissa now, and that's all I need. The next few months were a whirlwind. With Linda and Robert's help, I found a small apartment closer to them. The divorce proceedings were ugly, with Ryan fighting me every step of the way. But in the end, it was done. I was free of him, at least legally. When my daughter, Sophia, was born on a crisp autumn morning, it was Linda who held my hand through the labor. Robert paced the waiting room, every bit the nervous grandfather. Ryan refused to even see Sophia. When I took him to court for child support, he had the audacity to demand a paternity test. I agreed, knowing the truth. The results came back, confirming what I already knew, Sophia was his. The court ordered him to pay alimony, but I knew better than to count on his support. The years that followed were challenging, but also filled with unexpected joy. I threw myself into my studies, finally earning my degree in information technology. At work, my dedication paid off with a promotion to senior editor. But the real blessings were Linda and Robert. They embraced their role as grandparents with a fervor that sometimes brought tears to my eyes. Weekends were filled with trips to the park, family dinners, and impromptu movie nights. They were the family I'd always dreamed of, and Sophia adored them. 5 years flew by in a blur of bedtime stories, scraped knees, and proud moments. Sophia was growing into a smart, kind little girl, with her grandmother's smile and her grandfather's curiosity. Then, one ordinary Tuesday, everything changed again. Robert collapsed at home. The diagnosis was grim: advanced pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave him months, maybe weeks. I threw myself into helping Linda care for him. Work, Sophia, my own needs, everything took a back seat. Robert had been more of a father to me than my own had ever been, and I was determined to be there for him until the end. Despite our best efforts, despite the treatments and the prayers, Robert slipped away from us 3 months later. I held Linda as she wept, feeling as though I'd lost my own father. At the funeral, I stood between Linda and Sophia, our hands linked. Ryan didn't show up. I hadn't really expected him to, but his absence was a stark reminder of how far he'd fallen. As the weeks passed, Linda's health began to decline rapidly. The loss of Robert seemed to have drained her will to live. She became frail, often confused, and prone to long bouts of silence. The solution came to me that night as I lay awake, worrying. The next morning, I called my boss and arranged to work remotely. Then I packed up Sophia and our essentials and moved into Linda's house. Our new routine took some adjusting. I hired a nurse to care for Linda during the mornings while I worked on my video editing projects. In the afternoons, Sophia and I would take over. We'd read to Linda, help her with her physical therapy exercises, or simply sit and reminisce about happier times. Weeks turned into months. Linda had good days and bad days. On the good days, we'd sit in the garden, enjoying the sunshine and each other's company. On the bad days, I'd hold her hand as she cried for Robert, for the son she'd lost long before his father's death. One sunny afternoon, Sophia and I returned from a walk to find a man in a crisp business suit leaving the house. My heart raced, fearing the worst. "Linda?" I called out as we entered. "Is everything okay?" She was sitting in her favorite armchair, looking tired but composed. "Everything's fine, dear." That was just Mr. Harrison, my lawyer. I needed to discuss some legal matters with him. I nodded, not pressing for details. If Linda wanted to share, she would. "All right, how about some tea?" 3 weeks later, Linda passed away in her sleep. With shaking hands, I dialed Ryan's number. When he answered, I struggled to keep my voice steady. "Ryan, it's Isabella. Your mother passed away this morning." There was a long pause, then Ryan's voice, cold and detached. "Well, I can't say I'm surprised or particularly upset. That woman made her choices. Look, I'm not coming to the funeral. Just let me know when the will reading is scheduled." On the day of the funeral, the church was packed. Linda had touched so many lives, and it showed. As I stood at the pulpit to deliver the eulogy, with Sophia holding my hand, I looked out at the sea of faces. Friends, neighbors, colleagues, all there to say goodbye to a woman who had loved so fiercely and been loved in return. Ryan's absence was a palpable void, a reminder of the tragedy that had torn this family apart. But as I began to speak, sharing memories of Linda's kindness, her strength, her unwavering love, I realized something profound. Family isn't always about blood. Sometimes, it's about choice. And Linda had chosen to love me, to love Sophia, even when her own son had turned his back on us all. As we laid Linda to rest beside Robert, I made a silent promise. I would honor her memory by living with the same love and grace she had shown me. And I would make sure Sophia grew up knowing the incredible grandparents she had been blessed with, even if their time together had been all too brief. A few days after we laid Linda to rest, I received a call from Mr. Harrison, Linda's lawyer. "Mrs. Thompson, it's time to read the will. Can you come to my office tomorrow at 10 a.m.? I've already contacted Mr. Thompson. He'll be there." The next morning, I arrived at the law office, my stomach in knots. I took a deep breath and walked in. Ryan was there with Melissa, both dressed expensively and wearing matching scowls. Melissa's eyes raked over me, her lip curling in disdain. "Let's begin," Mr. Harrison said, opening a folder. As he read, I watched Ryan's face. At first, he looked bored, then confused, and finally, as realization dawned, furious. "This can't be right," he interrupted. "Read it again." Mr. Harrison sighed. "Mr. Thompson, it's quite clear. Your mother has left all her property, including the house, to Isabella Thompson and her daughter, Sophia." Ryan rounded on me. "You," he snarled. "You manipulated my mother, you gold-digging scum. Well, enjoy it while you can. I'm kicking you out of that house today." As they stormed out, Melissa paused at the door. "You might have won this round," she hissed, "but trust me, we're not done." I sat there, shell-shocked, as Mr. Harrison explained the details of the will. It wasn't just the house. Linda had left everything to Sophia and me, her savings, her investments, everything. "She wanted to ensure you and Sophia would be taken care of," Mr. Harrison said gently. "Linda loved you both very much." Tears welled up in my eyes. Even after she was gone, Linda was still looking out for us. But Ryan was true to his word. The harassment started that very night, incessant phone calls, threats, promises to destroy me. I changed my number, but it didn't stop. Then came the intimidation. Men would approach us on the street, making vague threats about paying what we owed. Sophia was terrified, clinging to me whenever we left the house. One day, as a man was making his usual threats, I discreetly hit record on my phone. As soon as he left, I went straight to the police station. The investigation moved quickly. With my recording and testimony, along with statements from neighbors who had witnessed the harassment, the police built a solid case against Ryan. When confronted with the evidence, Ryan's hired thugs quickly turned on him, confirming he had paid them to scare us. I'll never forget the look on Ryan's face when the officer slapped the handcuffs on him. In the end, I was granted a restraining order against Ryan. He wasn't allowed within 500 feet of Sophia or me, or to contact us in any way. That night, as I tucked Sophia into bed, I looked around the room that had once been Linda's sewing room. Now it was filled with stuffed animals and children's books, a testament to the new life we were building. "Grandma and Grandpa are watching over us," Sophia mumbled sleepily, clutching the teddy bear Robert had given her on her 3rd birthday. "Yes, they are," I whispered, kissing her forehead. "And they'd be so proud of you, my brave girl." Life had finally settled into a peaceful rhythm. Sophia was thriving in school, and I had recently been promoted to deputy director at the TV station. Linda and Robert's legacy had given us security, but I was determined to build our own success. One sunny afternoon, as I left work, a familiar figure stepped out from behind a parked car. Melissa, Ryan's wife, looked nothing like the polished woman I remembered. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed. "Isabella, please," she said, her voice breaking. "I need your help." I tensed, ready for another confrontation, but her next words caught me off guard. "Our son is sick. He needs surgery. Please, we need money. Just half of the inheritance." "You don't need it all, do you?" Something felt off. "What's wrong with him?" I asked cautiously. Melissa's eyes darted around. It's his heart. No, his kidneys. The doctors say." As she fumbled through her explanation, I remembered our first encounter, her smug smile as she declared victory in our battle. A cold clarity washed over me. "You know, Melissa," I said calmly, "someone once told me that I had to fight for my happiness. And it looks like you've already lost this battle." Her face transformed, the mask of desperation replaced by fury. You scum, she spat. You owe us that money. It should have been ours. I stood my ground. I don't owe you anything. Now leave, or I'm calling the police. As I walked away, her curses fading behind me, I felt a sense of closure. The last tie to my old life had been severed. That night, I made a decision. It was time for a fresh start. I sold Linda's house and bought a new one in a different neighborhood. Somewhere Ryan and Melissa wouldn't find us. Now, as I sit in our new living room, watching Sophia do her homework, I'm filled with gratitude. Gratitude for Linda and Robert, who loved us unconditionally. Gratitude for the strength I found within myself. And yes, even gratitude for the hardships that led me here,